All right, so I guess we'll start. So it's, I guess, 6:31, February 8th, 2021. So my name is William Riley. I'm a counselor in West Lincoln. I'm also the chair of the Planning, Building, and Environmental Committee. This is meeting number 2 of 2021. And yeah, so hopefully everyone's ready. Here we go. So due to the efforts to contain the spread of COVID-19 and to protect all individuals, the council chamber will not be open to the public for attending standing committee and council meetings until further notice. The public may submit comments for matters that are on the agenda to jdyson@westlincoln.ca before 4:30 on the day of the comments submitted will be considered as public information and read into the record. This meeting will be recorded and available on the township website within 48 hours of the meeting. At this point, I'll look around to see if there's any disclosure of pecuniary interest and or conflict of interest. Seeing and hearing none, we'll move forward to the public meetings. First public meetings under 3.1 is a zoning bylaw amendment for Kenneth Martin, file number 1601000121. And I will bring that up on my screen here. So this is a public meeting to consider a zoning bylaw amendment application submitted by Kenneth Martin. File number again is 1601-001-21. The Planning Act requires in section 3412 that before passing a zoning bylaw amendment, council must hold at least one public meeting for the purpose of informing the public in respect of the amendment. The purpose of the public meeting is to receive comments and answer questions from the public regarding the amendment to the Township of West Lincoln zoning bylaw. We stress that at no point, or not at this point, no decision has been made on the proposed amendment, and any comments received will be taken into account by council in their consideration. The Planning Act also requires through section 3413 that council advise the public that if a person or a public body does not make an oral submission at the public meeting or make a written submission to the Township of West Lincoln before the bylaw is passed, that the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision of council for the Township of West Lincoln to the local planning appeal tribunal, also known as LPAT. Would the deputy clerk please advise the method and dates by which notice of the public meeting was given?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Proper notice was given by way of mail distribution to neighboring properties within 120 meters of the subject property, and public notice circulation to agencies on January 15th, 2021. Additionally, a yellow sign was posted on the subject property on January 20th, 2021, as well as advertised on the township's website.
Excellent, thank you for that. Will the planner one, Megan Burbick, please explain the purpose and reason for the proposed zoning bylaw amendment?
Through you, Mr. Chair, this is an application that is a condition of consent from a Committee of Adjustment hearing in December 16th. So a portion of land from their neighboring property that's an agricultural purpose only, that property can't maneuver their farming equipment through a portion of their land, so they're giving it over to Ken Martin to make the property parcels line up better. So the portion of land that is in question was 0.178 hectares. So that portion of land will be rezoned to rural residential along with Ken Martin's initial residential property. The initial residential property was zoned agricultural, but due to its size as being less than 40 acres, as it is only or 40 hectares, as it is only 1 hectare, it is being rezoned to rural residential.
Excellent. At this point, I guess I'll ask if the applicant or their authorized agent is present and would like to speak to this application whatsoever.
I am present, and no, I don't think I have anything to add. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ken. And so that being the case, are there any other oral or written submissions from anyone present on the Zoom meeting regarding the proposed zoning bylaw amendment? I will like to stress that this may be the only public meeting held with respect to this application. Therefore, if any members of the public that are in attendance of this Zoom call of the Zoom public meeting would like to make their comments and or written comments, this would be the time to do so. You'd have two options in how to be able to participate. One being using a computer or smartphone, you'll select the raise your hand control that can be found at the bottom of the Zoom options listed in the display of your screen. Or two, using a landline or telephone, you'll dial *9. This will notify staff that you have raised your hand through the phone. Once you've been acknowledged, please unmute your microphone. And it's important to also note that you provide your comments now. If you do not do so in writing or verbally, LPAT may not consider comments made during any other council and or committee meeting. Also, anyone wishing to speak are required to unmute their microphone to talk. And once they are finished, we do request that they actually remute their microphone so that we don't hear all the stuff that's going on in the background. And prior to speaking, we do ask that you provide your name and address for the record. So with all that being said, is there anybody who would like to address this that's with us tonight? So I'm not seeing anyone. I'll give maybe another couple of seconds there in case we're getting someone on the phone here. And I'm gonna go to our tech. Roberta, do you see anything that I'm not seeing on this side here?
Seeing none, Mr. Chair.
Okay. So that being the case, I will move forward to members of the committee. Do any members of committee have any oral written submissions on the proposed zoning bylaw amendment? Again, please note that members of committee are required to unmute their microphone to talk, and once they are finished, they should mute their microphone again. So members of committee, is there anything you'd like to share? Let it be heard now. Not seeing any. So then please be advised that a technical report is being considered by committee this evening and that a recommendation report will be forthcoming to a future committee and or council meeting. Please be advised that once the committee and council meeting has made their decision with respect to the zoning bylaw amendment, and if approved by council, a notice of its passing will be circulated with an appeal period. If you wish to be notified of this council's decision, please ensure that you provide the township clerk, Joanne Shime, at jshime@westlincoln.ca with the request, and then you can be notified. And I just got to bring my screen up here. Apologies. What's going on? Anyone who is interested in observing council and or committee decisions about a particular bylaw should not solely rely on mailed notices, thus miss the opportunity to attend applicable meetings. It is suggested that if you would like to also see future council meetings, committee meetings, you can do so through the township website for posting of agendas to review items that will be discussed at council and or committee meetings. The agendas for meetings are posted at the township website after 4 p.m. on Friday prior to the meeting. Additionally, meeting schedules are noted on the township website for the public to view. If you wish to receive notices by email, it is suggested that you provide or contact the township clerk to advise that you would like to be included in such requests, and you'll be provided provide them with your email along with your mailing address and your phone number. So at this point, the public meeting with respect to the proposed zoning bylaw amendment is concluded at the hour of 6:39 p.m. So we're gonna go on to the.
I'm free to go, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, perfect. Yes, you are. Sorry, I didn't see who just spoke there. So yes, Mr. Martin, you're more than welcome to go. You're also more than welcome to stay if you want to.
Okay.
If you have nowhere else to be tonight. So
thank you very much, Council.
Okay. So I'm just making the font a little bigger on my side here. So please just give me a second. Oops. All right, I'll just do my best. All right, so we're going to move forward to 3.2 zoning bylaw amendment. Kathy and William, and I'm going to apologize if I say the last name wrong by bringing it to Vichusi. How do I say that so I don't sound like I'm butchering it? Cheryl, do you know how to say that?
Vitucci.
Vitucci. Okay, my apologies. I'm very sorry.
No problem.
Vitucci. Okay.
So
I bet. Okay, so moving things forward here. This is a public meeting to consider a zoning bylaw amendment application submitted by Kathy and William Fichucci, file number 1601-002-21. The Planning Act requires in section 3412 that before passing a zoning bylaw amendment, council must hold at least one public meeting for the purpose of informing the public in respect of the amendment, that the purpose of this meeting is to receive comments and to answer questions from the public regarding the amendment to the Township of West Lincoln zoning bylaw. We stress that at this point, no decision has been made on the proposed amendment, and any comments received will be taken into consideration by council and their consideration. The Planning Act also requires through section 3413 that council advise the public that if a person or public body does not make any oral or written submissions at a public meeting, that the township, before the township bylaws pass, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision of council for the Township of West Lincoln to the local planning appeal tribunal. Sorry. I'm just going to see. Oh, this looks different here. So I'm not. I apologize here. I'm going to assume there's just give me one quick second here. This script looks a little different. So let me just see. So I'm going to go to the deputy clerk for a second. So I don't have on my side here under this section, the notice where I'm supposed to come to you to have you verify the methods and dates in which notice was given. And so I'm going to assume that was an oversight. So I'm going to go to the deputy clerk to please have her advise them which dates and methods were used to provide the notice to the public.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Proper notice was given by way of mail distribution to neighboring properties within 120 meters of the subject property and public notice circulation to agencies on January 15th, 2021. Additionally, a yellow sign was posted on the subject property as well as advertised on the township's website.
Excellent. Thank you, Jessica. And so I'm going to ask planner number 2, Madison Etzel, to please explain the purpose and reason for the proposed zoning bylaw amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. An application for rezoning has been made by William and Kathy Vitucci for an agricultural property municipally known as 5291 Regional Road 20. This application is required as a condition of consent for a surplus severance application. This application was conditionally approved by the Committee of Adjustment on November 25th, 2020. This rezoning application is to rezone 0.4 hectares of land from agricultural to rural residential, and to also rezone the remaining agricultural land from agricultural to agricultural purposes only, with a site-specific exemption, which would recognize a deficient lot size of 31 hectares, whereas 40 hectares is the minimum required size. The policies in the regional policy plan allow for surplus farm dwelling severances as a result of a farm consolidation, as long as residential dwellings are prohibited on any vacant remnant parcel of land. The township's official plan allows for severances in the agricultural area where 2 or more farms, being contiguous or non-contiguous, have been amalgamated under the ownership of a bona fide farmer, and an existing house which is capable of habitation and is considered surplus to the needs of the farmer. The Township Building Department, Public Works Department, and PCA in Niagara Region have no objections to this application, and staff have received no public comments for this application. Township staff have completed a preliminary review of the application, and a future staff report will provide a recommendation with following input received through this public meeting. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. So I'm going to ask the applicant or their authorized agent at this time if they would like to speak to this. They're more than welcome to do so.
We have no comment at this time.
Excellent, thank you. And then moving forward, I'm going to ask, I guess, the clerk if there have been any oral or written submissions from anyone present on the Zoom meeting. Oh, sorry, I guess I jumped that. Are there any oral or written submissions from anyone that are currently on the Zoom meeting regarding the proposed zoning bylaw? I would like to stress that this may be the only time the public can actually address this application. Therefore, if any members of the public that are in attendance at the Zoom public meeting, this is worded funny, would like to make comments and or provide written comments, they should do so now by using one of the 2 options. 1, using a computer or smartphone, select the raise your hand control that can be found on the Zoom options listed display on the screen, or 2, using a landline telephone number. All you have to do is hit the *9. This will notify staff to raise your hand. Once you've been acknowledged to speak, we're going to ask you to unmute your microphone. It's important that once you're done speaking that you remute your microphone. Anyone wishing to speak are required to unmute their microphone to talk. And once I've already said this, so this is duplicate. So at this point, is there anybody who are currently on the Zoom meeting here would like to speak to this? Not seeing any. Okay, so I'm going to assume nobody needs to speak to us. So I'm going to go to members of committee. Do any members of committee have any oral or written submissions on the proposed zoning bylaw amendment? Please note that members of committee must make their comments now, as LPAT may not consider comments made any other council or committee meeting. Any members of council wishing to speak are required to unmute their microphone to talk, and once they're finished, they should remute their microphone. So committee, do we have any comments or questions? And not seeing any. So please be advised that technical report is being considered by committee this evening, and that a recommendation report will be forthcoming to a future committee and or council meeting. Please be advised that once committee and or council has made a decision with respect to the zoning bylaw amendment, and if approved by council, a notice of their passing will be circulated with an appeal period. If you wish to be notified of council's decision, please ensure that you email the township clerk, Joanne Shimei, which is at jshimei@westlincoln.ca. Anyone who is interested in observing council and or committee discussions about a particular bylaw should not solely rely on email notices, thus miss the opportunity to attend an applicable meeting. It is suggested that you watch the township website for posting of agendas to review items that we will discuss at council and or committee meeting. The agendas for the meetings are posted on the township website at 4 p.m. on the Friday prior to the meeting on the Monday of the following week. Additionally, meeting schedules are also noted on the township website for the public to view. If you wish to receive notices by email, it is suggested that you contact the township clerk to advise your request and include your email along with your mailing address and your phone number. So at this point, this public meeting with respect to the proposed zoning bylaw amendment is concluded at the hour 6:47.
Thank you. Have a good night.
You too. Thank you. So I'm going to move forward here, and we're going to go to see if there's any members of council or committee here that would like to change an order of items on the agenda. Not seeing any. Sorry, I'm just trying to change my screen size here. All right, so at this point, I'm going to come to appointments. So under item 5.1, item P14-21, Dan Curry from MHBC Planning Limited, East Smithville Secondary Plan, has a PowerPoint presentation. So Dan, if you would like to start, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair Riley. Mr. Treble, I didn't know if you wanted to make some opening comments or not.
Dan, I can. That would be a good idea, perhaps. So through you, Mr. Chair, East Smithville is an area that we've described as the lands to the east of Industrial Park Road, mainly on the north side of Regional Road 20, St. Catherine Street. But for the purposes of the study, we've also included the lands on the south side to 20 Mile Creek. Inside that area, the designation is generally commercial or employment, and there are pressures for a mix of residential, work at home, and employment type uses in that area. Council might recall, although some of it goes back to previous council, one of the property owners, the one at the very east end, had started a process of applying to change the designation of their property. And it was felt that it was better to look at the area as a whole and not look at the one property in isolation of this area. So they took a look, or took a stab at a secondary plan for the area, which did not really deal with things adequately. And as a result, we hired MHBC Planning to do a full secondary plan review on behalf of the township, so that we're once again leading the process and making recommendations that are in the best interests of the township, and hopefully then we're able to see some development occur inside this area. So Dan has put together a recommendation report, which we wanted to present tonight. It has about 3 different options in it, as I recall. And staff are recommending that those 3 options then go forward to a public meeting so that we can have some discussion and then come back and make a final decision at committee and council after a public process.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Treble. So, Madam Clerk, just to make sure I'm doing this technically correct, I've got the presentation. Do you want me to bring it up via sharing my screen? Is that the usual procedure?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Curry, yes, that is the proper procedure. You can go ahead and share your screen, and I believe you have access to do so.
I do. Thank you. And I'll just confirm, Mr. Chair, Chair Riley, you can see the screen. Everyone else, somebody nod? Okay, thank you. It's always a bit of a adventure sometimes. Thank you. So as Brian said, we've been retained, or Mr. Treble has said, we've been retained to undertake the secondary plan. Also with me tonight, Michelle Baya. You will see her name on one of the items on the Zoom call. She's one of our good young planners and joining me on this project as well. So the intent here, we're partway through this project, and the purpose of the presentation is really an information overview. Brian's given a bit of the background, so I won't spend a lot of time, but we've completed a background report, which is really the technical analysis of the constraints on the land. Can services be extended? As you know, there's a railway track. So some of the technical work that we have to undertake to be able to prepare an appropriate secondary plan. And then we've produced 3 land use concepts for discussion with the community. And we have had some consultation to date. So it's really 3, 4, and 5. I don't have a long presentation, maybe 15 minutes, but it's really focused on those 3 elements of the project of where we're at so far. So the background, again, Mr. Treble gave an overview. It's really to consider, should there be alternative land use in this area? And it's a 3-phased approach. We're really in phase 2. We've completed the preparation of all the background research, and we're initiating the consultation. Ultimately, it leads to the completion of a secondary plan, which would be, again, through a bit of a process and then ultimately forwarded to you for consideration. So the lands are right at the southwest corner of the urban area, Smithville. They're in the urban area, and they have been for many years. And they are currently, so the subject land, the study area, the secondary plan area is identified in red dotted outline. So the land use right now is primarily shows up as gray on my screen and purple. The gray is designated employment in the township's official plan. And so a whole range of industrial uses. The portion of the lands really that front St. Catharines Street is designated service commercial. And that would, the intended use there is really vehicle-oriented commercial uses that need a fair bit of space. So the lands have been designated as such for many years, but they haven't ever developed. So part of this, or maybe really the primary reason for undertaking this secondary plan is to determine whether there would be other land uses that would be appropriate. So the background report was a lot of the technical work as part of our consulting team. We've got Crozier Consulting Engineers. So they looked at the servicing, natural environment, transportation. As I said, we've reviewed the existing constraints, both physical, those on the land, as well as the policy framework. So we've also the secondary plan has to comply with the regional official plan, the growth plan, things like minimum density requirements, etc. So very briefly, I'll spin through the technical work. I'll give you an overview. If I've gone too quickly, we can always come back at the end of the presentation if you have questions and I've maybe been too superficial. But the natural heritage features to the southwestern boundary is 20 Mile Creek. That natural environmental feature is well understood. But on the north side of St. Catherine Street, there were really three areas that Crozier was looking at in detail: area A, B, and C. And just going from west to east, A. So there's a couple of these tributaries that ultimately outlet to 20 Mile Creek. The one that's in area A is a little bit more defined. It's not a stream, but when it's wet and in the spring, it's seasonally wet. So it does provide some ecological and environmental function. So Crozier is recommending that be protected from development. For the most part, the northern part of that is basically cropped. But you can see how some of these elements of that tributary extend to the north. There are culverts underneath the railway that facilitate drainage. Area B, if you're familiar with the lands, there's a bit of a wooded area, almost a hedgerow. And it wasn't clear whether that's providing any ecological function for habitat or whether there's significant tree species in there. That was evaluated by Crozier, and it is not. It's not providing any ecological significant function, so it could be removed. And then again, over on the east side of the property, there is another tributary, and it's even less well defined than number A, but it does, and both of them have potential fish habitat, only in the spring and the very wet time of year, but they meet the criteria and at this point are being identified to be protected. The other component, Crozier looked at the drainage. This is a bit of a complex map, but essentially the lands are very flat, but essentially what happens in terms of existing drainage is it's really the eastern half of the subject lands drain to the east, the western half drain to the west, each of them to those tributaries. The land south of St. Catherine Street, it's even more simple. They just drain directly to the southwest into 20 Mile Creek. So the drainage pattern isn't very complicated. It's the basis ultimately for a general stormwater management strategy that would be included in the secondary plan. And I'll speak to that a little bit when we talk to the land use concepts. The other technical analysis piece was connection to sanitary sewer, water services. Again, this is very straightforward. The existing sanitary sewer and water, they're shown in water in blue, sanitary in green. They're right. Currently, those services are at the corner of Industrial Road and St. Catherine Street. Crozier has looked at the capacities downstream in both instances, and there is no significant infrastructure upgrades needed to be able to service these lands. The sewer and the water mains would just simply need to be extended into the secondary plan area. Looked at transportation access. Again, it's not very complicated. Bounded on the west by Industrial Road, and then St. Catherine Street, of course, goes through the lands. So those are the two roads where there's potential access. So the new roundabout shown by the yellow area would be one of the points of access into this community, and the green arrow on Industrial Road, and likely the best location is right about where that arrow is, which would be directly aligned with the main entrance into the commercial plaza on the west side of the street. Important to note that Crozier did identify that a third access would meet the technical transportation requirement on St. Catherine's, a third access between the yellow arrow and the intersection at Industrial Road and St. Catharines. About halfway in between would meet all the required criteria for distance between intersections and site distance. But in discussions with the region, they are not interested at all at an additional intersection at that portion of St. Catharines. So we're really looking at two entrances to this community plan area. So one of the other components, the CP line, and again, there is requirements for setbacks from that line. Also requirements if it's sensitive uses such as residential uses for buffering of noise, etc. So not a real constraint, but certainly something we need to be paying attention to and should be included in secondary plan policies to give direction to development. One of the others I want to spend a couple minutes with is compatibility with industrial uses. So the province has guidelines that speak to compatibility between industrial facilities and sensitive uses, and residential uses are considered sensitive uses. So there's a requirement that, and you can see in this table, the industrial classification. Class 1 industrial is really what I'd call a business park, office park type uses. Class 2 or medium type industrial uses, and then class 3, which are the heavy industrial uses. And they each have a greater setback as you go up in that class. And really what it is to protect or increase the distance between industrial uses, and particularly the heavy ones, which may result in noise, vibration, odor, or other impacts on residents. And right now, I'll go to the next slide maybe as I speak to this. So secondary plan area shown in red directly abuts the railway, and to the north, shown in a blue shade, is the Smithville Industrial Park. And the Smithville Industrial Park, the zoning and the designation permit all forms of residential, or sorry, all forms of industrial uses, which would include some class 3 types of uses. So there's two ways to address that compatibility in those setback guidelines. So option 1 on the left is the setback is taken from the industrial source where the building or the function is happening. And the one on the right, option 2, is where the setback is taken from the edge of the property. And they both have different implications. So to the north, the Harbison Walker facility is considered a class 3 industrial use. So on the left-hand side in option 1, if you measured the setback from the building where the noise and the vibration could be emanating from, you can see that 300-meter distance really doesn't impact the secondary plan area hardly at all. So it could be, the land use could be changed, developed to residential. And if the industrial setbacks, compatibility setbacks are measured in this fashion, there's really little impact on the secondary plan. There is impact to the industrial users if it's measured that way, because any future expansion of that facility, while expansion could occur, it really wouldn't be in compliance with the guidelines if manufacturing type use was extended towards the rail line, whereby closer than the 300 meters to any potential residential uses. The option 2 is really the best way to measure it, or the preferred way to measure, which is from the property boundary. So in this case, there'd be no impact on the industrial uses. They could expand, but as you can see, that 300-meter setback line really negates a lot of the secondary plan area from being converted to residential. So that's part of the technical work that's been completed that helps to inform the land use options and then ultimately the secondary plan. There's another number of other components that we looked at, policy, and the one that I will mention in terms of just upper level policy is that there's a need to achieve minimum density targets. These lands are in the urban area, in the designated greenfield, and a minimum density of 50 people and jobs is the minimum that it would need to achieve in terms of density. So what we've done, and sort of the purpose of this phase, is to take the technical information, the planning information, the policy information, and prepare some land use options. And I'll describe, and to get feedback from committee, but also the landowners and the community in general. And I'll say a few things. These land use options are very conceptual at this point. So these diagrams are kind of blocky. But the intent here is not to prepare and propose a detailed plan, but propose some of the basic building blocks of a secondary plan to get comment. And there are a few common things to each of those, each of these options. And one would be this, and I'm not sure if you can see my mouse, my cursor or not, but that narrow gray hockey stick shaped piece is the potential collector road that connects at the roundabout and then connects to Industrial Road, roughly where that green arrow was on one of the previous slides. So that would be the collector road, the main artery. And then of course there'd be a number of local streets that would connect to that. We haven't got to that level of detail yet in terms of street layout. That would come later. But that's one option that's consistent. Both of those little tributaries are identified green, which it's a 30-meter wide, so 15 meters buffer on each side of the tributary. The blue blocks are really to signify the area that would be needed for a stormwater management facility. The general strategy here in terms of stormwater management would be for two stormwater management ponds, each one outletting to the adjacent tributary. So that's what that blue represents. And the other one that's consistent with all is this green right in the middle. So if this area is residential, provision of parks would be a necessary component of a community. The township's OP and township staff have identified that a neighborhood level park would be appropriate. So we've just simply put a block in there that represents the 5% parkland dedication that would be required through the planning process. And the input to date would be that it should be centrally located, but it may or may not be here. It may not be in that shape. This is just to represent that there would be a park of roughly this size. So the other description to the land use is the yellow. In this version, that's low density residential, single detached houses, townhouses. Along St. Catherine Street, high density residential. The region will not permit additional road connections, but also not driveways. So apartment buildings that front that street but are accessed from the rear would be appropriate. This pink gray hatched area that's on the western and northern part of the property in this option is what we call commercial / class 1 industrial. So types of uses would be office, business park related uses, those that fit within that class 1 definition of industrial uses. And therefore the setback between residential uses is very minimal. It's only 20 meters. So there's very good compatibility between it and low-rise residential. And so they would act as a bit of a buffer between the sensitive uses and the lands to the north. A range of commercial uses, but a much more limited range than what you see across the street at the commercial plaza to the west. And then on the south side of St. Catharines, we've got the green area that's associated with the creek and its natural environment features. The cross hatching that is shown is the floodplain So there's additional restrictions in terms of what can and can't be constructed even in that crosshatched area. And then what we're showing, and we've shown it in all three options, they're all the same for the south side of St. Catherine Street, would be mixed use. And the township has a mixed use designation in the official plan, which allows for high and medium density residential, along with a limited range of commercial and service uses too, which is a bit of a reflection in terms of what's there already, but also just given the limited area of those lands and the complication with the floodplain and the adjacency to St. Catharines, which is also a truck route. There's a limited range of options that would be appropriate. So I'll just spin through the other couple options. Option 2 is similar in some ways, all those same components that I said were sort of standard throughout in terms of the road, the natural environmental features, the stormwater management, the park. But what this one does is go the other way in terms of greater area devoted to residential uses. That pink industrial business park, really, I guess I should call it, remains, although the area is much smaller. And an option, rather than high density residential along St. Catherine Street, could be the mixed use form of development. And option 3 is a version of the status quo, which is if the lands, if residential use wasn't introduced at all and the lands remained primarily employment, what would be the best way to deal with that? So again, all the same base elements as the previous concepts, but the business park and service commercial is along St. Catherine Street, with the interior then of the secondary plan area being industrial or employment. Again, mixed use still on the south side of St. Catherine Street, reflecting the fact that there is a little bit of residential there existing, but it could be flexible. It could be residential, could be employment, could be a bit of commercial. So these options are conceptual. They're still very blocky in their layout, but the intent is to get community feedback on sort of the basic land use, basic building blocks of a neighborhood, and then in particular to start to hear from some of the landowners who own these lands and get their feedback in terms of their desires and to the extent they've had any in terms of what they foresee as redeveloping. And I think, yeah, that takes us to that slide. So the consultation to date, the technical background work was forwarded to Region of Niagara staff, the Conservation Authority staff, township staff, and we received some technical feedback, technical comments. We had a series of meetings about 3 weeks ago with most of the owners who own land within the secondary plan area. And it's a pretty high level summary, but the general agreement or the common points that we received were that they all supported moving towards extending or improving the range and mix of uses and providing flexibility. The owners on the south side of St. Catherine Street, as well as the owners on the north side, or at least the ones that engaged with us to date. There are some areas of concern, particularly around staging, and this would be on the north side. And I'll just go back to that slide so I can. This one might be the best one. You can see on the north side of St. Catherine Street, there's two very thin lines that really divide the property up into, that indicates the property lines. So the property is, the whole secondary plan area north of St. Catherine Street consists of just 3 landowners. And so it's interesting. It's the landowners furthest to the east who are, I would say, most interested in developing right away. The landowners in the middle are maybe have medium interest, and we haven't heard yet from the landowners furthest to the west. But one of the concerns was around, particularly expressed by the landowner furthest to the east, just how this works in terms of phasing if the other two landowners aren't interested in developing, and how you extend services. And then importantly for them, they don't have road access. The location of the roundabout and the extension of the collector road into the secondary plan area isn't on their land, so they don't control that. So that's of concern to them. And so that'll have to get addressed through the secondary plan. And there was some question as to whether the environmental features that have been identified by Crozier really do have ecological sensitivity or not. So those were the main points that were expressed through that, through those consultations. So then lastly, just in terms of next steps, and Mr. Treble identified this, the purpose of this phase is to get feedback on those land use options, assist us with then developing collectively, us and the township staff, developing a preferred option, and then preparing a draft secondary plan. And then that draft secondary plan again would be put out for community consultation, and then following that consultation, finalized and ultimately presented to council for consideration and implementation through the official plan. So that brings me to the end. Thank you, first of all, and I'd be happy. I've gone over some of the, particularly the technical stuff, maybe a little quickly, or maybe not, but happy to, if there's any questions or further discussion, be happy to entertain that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for that presentation there, Mr. Curry. I'll look at members of the council this time. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Curry while we still have him? Councillor Ganan? Mayor Billsmill, you'll be second. And I see Harold.
Okay, just a couple of things, Mr. Curry. I did read the report, and it was very thorough, and I thank you for that. And I'm glad that you're over your presentation that you actually did tonight, which is kind of an overview of that. A couple of things came to mind as I read the report and then looked at the three options. One, the report indicated that this should be an eastern gateway to the town, and I am concerned about the third option looking quite empty. We've had difficulty with some other areas of town trying to fill those kinds of unique smaller businesses and whatever coming in. And so I worry about the gateway look. I think the house on the far side, of course, on the north side, is a very lovely entranceway into Smithville. And I worry about empty fields looking higgly-piggly, I think, on the other side of that. So that would be my concern about option 3. I did have a question about option 1 and 2, where there's, well, actually 3 and 2, where you've got the mixed commercial and also I think it's some, I don't know, both of them were sort of commercially looking things. And I wonder about the region. You said when you were talking about the high-rise area, the high density, that it would have to be, the backs would have to be along Highway 20, and that's fine, they're along St. Catherine Street. But is that true if we were looking at it being small commercial businesses? You were talking about traffic. So would they also need to go in and then come back at it, or will if there were would driveways be allowed in if it was a commercial area, I guess is where I'm getting to.
Sure. Through you, Chair Riley. The answer to that would be no. The region is not interested in granting any access, so it would be a form of development that front St. Catherine Street, but there would be some internal streets I would anticipate, and the parking lots in the rear. And you know, it is a form of development that you see in other places. And I would think of this, it'd be unlikely that it would be your typical retail type shop development that you might see in the downtown. The goal here is not to compete with the downtown and that type of commercial use, but more office related service commercial type uses. Not to say they won't necessarily also be, some of those be small footprint, but it's not, it wouldn't be intended in this version if this land use option went forward that it's a pedestrian oriented street retail type environment.
Okay, so thank you for that. I know I had kind of a convoluted question there, but the bottom line is what I'm concerned about is the look of that whole stretch coming in. And I guess the other point I want to make is that because we have industry that is growing in our industrial park, we also are very much in need of housing that's closer to that. So I guess that makes me tend towards looking at either option 1 or 2 that would consist of some housing that hopefully would be a mixed price range as well as mixed style, so that we could accommodate some people who would like to not only live in West Lincoln and in Smithville, but work here as well, or already are working here and would love not to live so far away eventually. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
All right, Mayor Bylsma.
So thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Curry, for the presentation. I always enjoy these sessions, just kind of, you know, really visionary at this point, and you know, it's exciting at certain level to be able to, you know, and it's an honor to be able to have some input and influence in the way that our town grows. And so I appreciate the options that you put forward. I'm like Councillor Ganan, very interested in the mixed use. I don't want to see this become heavily residential, and neither do I want to see it all industrial. But as the town has need, I appreciate you know, the mixed use and the balance. I also am one that would like to compel some of the more challenging types of uses to forward. Like I feel sometimes that residential is low-hanging fruit, and developers just like to do that because they can get in and get out, and the commercial and the industrial lands tend to take a little bit more effort to develop. And so I tend to feel that we need to compel a little bit more effort towards the commercial and the industrial lands to make sure that our town grows in a balanced sort of way. So that's just kind of my opening comment. I did have a couple of questions. First of all, with respect to the natural features, and you know, it sounds like there's a bit of a debate as to the magnitude of their significance, and I'm for one am always supportive of protecting natural features. But at the same time, is there, recently we saw an application, I think on the other end of town, where a particular feature like this, and I'm familiar with what they look like, I go past it all the time. Is there a potential for moving these streams or these ditches? As you said, they're seasonal. Is there a way that you can guide them? Is that part of protecting them when they're at this level?
Yeah, through you, Chair Riley, that's a really good question. Because it's in order for me to answer it, and sorry, I'll try not to give you the usual planner long-winded answer, but there's a couple of layers here that are important to understand. The secondary plan will really set the land use and the conceptual strategy for environmental protection, stormwater management, and transportation. And then what will happen after that, as all of you know, I think I'm stating the obvious, is that landowners will come forward with draft plans of subdivision. And the detail work that has to accompany those draft plans of subdivision will be an environmental impact study that then, and if I just use the landowner to the east, where we've got the less obvious or less defined water feature tributary, is they'll have to do an environmental impact assessment that will really come to the heart of that question. Is is it fish habitat or is it not fish habitat? If it's not, is there a function that it is playing, and does it extend all the way to the railway tracks, or does it not? And so our goal here is to identify that, given the scale that we're at, which is not way up in the air, but not right down on the ground either, kind of that middle level of planning, is that there's potentially an environmental feature here, and it's potentially of this scale. We don't need 30-meter setbacks. If this is a feature, it's probably 15. And what that does then, it sets up the policy framework so that when those draft plans of subdivision come forward, that's something that they have to, that's already set out that they have to look at. And there might be a number of different ways to be able to deal with that in an appropriate manner. And of course, that goes through an approval process, and you guys are part of that. And that will be the same with the stormwater management strategy as well.
Okay, thank you for that answer. I have one more question, and I appreciate that you're basically at this point just identifying that it's something that needs to be looked at, but it's not necessarily the final word on this. So just a question with respect to industrial uses, and this is a little bit more broadly asked of perhaps even the director, Mr. Treble. Heavy commercial, or heavy industrial. That's what I'm interested in. Heavy industrial, and Harbison Walker was identified. What drives that designation? Is it the type of use, or is it a quantity, or is it a combination of both? Harbison Walker, for example, isn't the industry that it once was, but is there a type of and they have quite a lot of land. Some significance about that heavy industry. Is it quantity driven or quality driven?
Sure, I can speak to the theoretical, and then Mr. Treble might want to fill in with what actually happens on the ground in Smithville. But it's quality driven. It's all about what the impacts are of a type of industry. Okay. So the heavy industries, those are the ones that emit odor, any one of these things: odor, particulates, vibration, or noise. And the lower one, class one, it's basically an office use, hardly anything. So it's all about the impact as to where they fit on that scale.
Okay, no, that provides clarity. I'm satisfied with that answer. We'll let the director off the hook for a follow-up. So thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'm done.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I believe Councillor Jonker was next.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Curry. First of all, thanks for the presentation. Like the mayor said, it's always interesting to see where we'd like to go forward and what we can do. And at the end of the day, yeah, the one question he asked, I was going to ask about the drainage, and so that was answered. The one question I still have is when we were talking, when you had on page 14, you have the minimum setbacks from industrial sources. We have two options. And so am I correct in understanding that we as the township can decide which way to go? And if we do, that going one way or the other will affect our options of how this land is designated. Do I understand that correctly? So maybe it's two questions. Firstly, do we as township or as here have the opportunity to do it either as one or two, and then do they affect what we can do with them in the future? That property is my question, I guess.
Through you, Chair Riley. Again, good questions. And the short answer to your first question, Councillor, is yes, these are guidelines, and the township has a certain level of control over which way you want to go, although recognizing that ultimately this secondary plan has to comply with regional official plan policy, and they will provide comment in this regard. So we'll have to satisfy the guidelines one way or the other. To your second question, it's really around, it's again, one of these situations that we deal with in planning all the time, and in committee you deal with all the time, which is the balancing of objectives and the balancing of impact and the balancing of interests. So either one of these methods or even a sort of a combination of both of them is appropriate. It's just, what are the implications of each? And I think it's pretty easy to see in those land use options that the difference between number 1 and number 2, so in this case, where that pink wraps around and kind of provides a buffer to the lands to the north, that's intentional. That's trying to address that setback, and it does it in a way. The implications, if you were to go with the other option where you introduce an awful lot of, or just a lot of residential, is that there's not really an impact to the existing continuation of those industrial uses. What might happen, for example, if Harbison Walker wants to expand, they can't expand in the direction towards the tracks. You know, they've got some vacant land there. They could still use that for parking and outdoor storage. They just couldn't use that for the types of activities that would drive, you know, some of those noxious impacts of noise, odor, vibration. So it limits their opportunities. So that's the balance, and part of the consideration, and a bit why I spent a bit of time on it going through the presentation, is most of the other constraints can all be dealt with. This can certainly be dealt with. It just, depending on which way you go, it has either more or less impact on one set of parties versus the other.
Thank you. Harold, did you have anything else?
Nope, thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you.
So I'll look around to see if anybody else has any other questions or comments. Not seeing any. So at this point, thank you, Mr. Curry, for your presentation. And yeah, and you're welcome to stick around for the remainder of the meeting, or if you have other plans, feel free to leave. We won't be offended.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll probably take my leave, but good luck with the rest of the meeting. Thank you.
No problem. So, okay, so moving forward, we got item 6 on the agenda, request to address items on the agenda. Note that section 10.13, bracket 5 and 6, general rules, 1 hour in total shall be allocated for this section of the agenda. And each individual person shall only be provided with 5 minutes to address their issue. Some exceptions may apply. A response may not be provided, and the matter may be referred to staff. A person who wishes to discuss a planning application or a matter that can be appealed will be permitted to speak for a maximum of 10 minutes. At this point, before I go to the gallery, I'm going to go to the deputy clerk, because I do know that we got a last minute request to address something on the agenda. So Deputy Clerk, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, we received some written comments from Phelps Homes later today, February 8th, to address staff report 9.2 item P17-21. So I will read that into the record now. The letter reads as follows. Regarding Township of West Lincoln Planning Committee meeting, February 8th, 2021, item P17-21. Dear committee members, Phelps Homes and the Township of West Lincoln have developed a strong working relationship throughout the years. We would like to speak on agenda item P17-21 regarding the proposed planning fee bylaw revision, which we feel would negatively impact developers in your community. While we appreciate the submissions of planning applications after development has occurred can often be more complex to process, Phelps Homes feels that the proposed additional planning fees places unfair financial burden on the applicant. Oftentimes, an unforeseen issue or site condition requires a change to design or deviation from what is initially approved is what prompts the additional planning applications. The applicant already incurs loss in time and money due to the unforeseen issues that require an additional application after work has started. The proposed additional planning fee would further compound the issues. We feel applicants should not be penalized because of their application are of more complex nature than others. With the increase in housing market demand, many municipalities often do not have the resources to process the applications in a timely manner. Smithville's growth is no exception. In these situations, builders will often proceed at their own risk with the installation of underground servicing work to help maintain the schedule for building construction. They may need to incur additional costs to revise the servicing, and the additional risk is solely on the expense of the builder. The additional fees in this circumstance would not be appropriate as the builder is adapting their process as a result of the municipality's shortage in resources. We would like to thank you for taking the time to consider our comments and request that the change proposed be denied or the wording be revised to include certain exceptions based on the concerns expressed. Thank you, Phelps Homes.
Excellent, thank you. And with that being said, is there anybody else who's in attendance tonight who would like to address the items on the agenda? Not seeing or hearing any, we're going to move forward. We're going to move to consent agenda items. All items listed below are considered to be a routine and non-controversial and can be approved by one resolution. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a council member requests it, in which case the item will be removed from consent resolution and considered immediately following adoption of the remaining consent agenda items. Under item P15-21, consent items, we have number 1, technical report PD-12-2021, Kenneth Martin zoning bylaw amendment, file number 1601-00121. 2, technical report PD-14-2021, William and Kathleen Vitucci, zoning bylaw amendment, file number 1601-002-21. 3, technical report PD-16-201 naming of the regional road 14 from Canberra Street to 20 road intersection, West Lincoln, PERS 911 compliance. And 4, information report number PD-15-2021, East Smithville Secondary Plan, future redevelopment and intensification. So at this point, I don't know if there's anybody who has anything they want to pull. I guess I need a mover. So I guess I'll have Councilor Gannon and Councilor Broderick. And does anybody have anything item they want to pull? And if not, is there any discussion? Not seeing any. So at this point, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? And those opposed? Okay, that passes unanimously. And moving forward, we have no communications tonight, so we're going to move on to staff reports. Staff report item P16-21, Planner 1, Megan Burwick, and Director of Planning, Brian Treble. Recommendation report number PD-19-2021-1970187, Ontario Inc., Jim Van Ryn. Amending site plan authorization bylaw. If I can get a mover. I have Mayor Bylsma, and seconder will be Councilor Trombetta. Any questions or comments? Not seeing any. I'll call the vote. All those in favor? And all those opposed? Okay, that passes. Before I move forward, I just want to confirm, Councilor Rayner, are you still with us? Councilor Rayner, are you still with us? Can't hear you, sir. You're muted. We'll just give you a second there.
With lips, it said it won't work if I can on the lip reader.
You want to provide that service to them? Should be in the bottom left of the screen. Just on his computer.
There he is.
There we are.
I don't know what happened. It won't work. I couldn't get it. You were asking and I couldn't say anything.
That's okay. I figured as much. If you want, sir, you can leave your camera unmuted. Just be mindful of that. So moving forward, we are on, I think we're just 9.1. So now we're going to go to 9.2. Just to confirm, Deputy Clerk, we're moving on to 9.2, right?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I just want to make sure I didn't do this twice. All right, so item 9.2, item P17-21, Planner 2, Garrett Borma, and Director of Planning, Brian Treble, re-recommendation report, PD-18-2021, planning fees bylaw revision. So can I get a mover? I have Councillor Trombetta and Councillor Braderick as my seconder. And any questions or comments? Not seeing or hearing any. So I'm going to call the question. All those in favor?
Support.
And all those opposed? That passes unanimously. Okay, moving forward to 9.3. So item P18-21, Director of Planning and Building, Brian Treble, recommendation report number P-17-2021. So I'm going to stop there for a second. So I think we have a couple of numbers out of, or I think that's supposed to be PD-18-2021, but I could be wrong. But a deeming bylaw, Casterville. Can I get someone to move that? I have Councillor Jonker and Mayor Bylsma as a seconder. Any questions or comments? Not seeing or hearing any. Oh, Mayor Bylsma has a question.
Yeah, I've never seen that word deeming before. So I maybe the director just wants to give us a definition of the word deeming.
Absolutely. Director, would you mind explaining?
Certainly. Through you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Mayor, you're very observant. This is the first time in my 15 years with the township that we have done a deeming bylaw. So this is new. You are bang on. It's a provision that's in the Act that allows basically council to take an old plan of subdivision where the lots are very small and they don't work anymore for development purposes. So in an unserviced settlement area like Casterville, when you have 66 by 132 or whatever dimension the lots are there, they're just too small for septic systems and houses on each lot. You leave the lot fabric in place, but you basically make it fuzzy. You can't sell those lots anymore. That's all we're doing here. So what happens is the existing parcel fabric is what applies, and they can't start pulling the pieces out. That's all we've done. You can always repeal it at some point down the road if it no longer applies.
Okay. All right. So in other words, if they get services, then those lots would be fine. And you know, all bets are off. Okay, no problem.
We could just repeal at that point.
Okay, thank you so much.
Excellent. So any other questions or comments by any members of council?
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Mr. Rayner. Councilor Rayner.
Through to the Director of Planning. Brian, was there not also years and years ago plans for a condominium complex somewhere very near to the Plazics, right on Casterville Road? Very close to 65 on the east side.
Through you, Mr. Chair, there is a strip of the land on the east side of Casterville Road, south of 65.
Correct.
That is split into a series of single-family residential building lots.
Right, that's what I thought.
Yeah, they are fairly large lots. I want to say like 2 acres or something like that in size each. And they've never been developed yet, but I think the day is very close when we're going to see it happen. There have been a couple of minor little servicing tweaks that have been discussed. And once that's done, I suspect those lots will be on the market.
Well, that's the reason I asked, because I'm wondering, were those one of the ones you may be contemplating to use the word deemed for? But you're saying they're sufficient size.
These ones are sufficient size. That's correct. Through you, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you.
Excellent. So any other questions or comments? Not seeing or hearing anything, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor?
Support.
And all, I guess that's everybody. And so that passes unanimously. So moving forward to item 9.4, item P19-21 bylaw enforcement officer Tiana Richardson and director of planning and building Brian Treble, read technical report PD-13-2021 ATV regulation changes, province of Ontario. So if I can get somebody to move that. I have Councillor Trombetta and Councillor Ganan. And any questions or comments? Oh, Councillor Trombetta.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through Mr. Chair to Mr. Treble. What's for this motion here? What's driving this, Mr. Director? Why is this coming into fruition now? You know, a lot of people have 100-acre properties, a lot of ATVs. What's triggering this is the word I was looking for.
Through you, Mr. Chair. It actually came to our attention in a couple of different manners, including a discussion our CIO had with a local Niagara Regional Police representative, and also officially through staff at the Ministry of Transportation. But the province has changed the rules of provincial policy, and in the following way. Back in the early 2000s, I think around 2003, there were some rules put in place at that point that basically said, if a lower tier municipality does not want ATVs on your local roads, do nothing. The province does not allow it unless you want it allowed, and then you had to pass a bylaw to allow it. Now, for some reason, the province has flipped their position around so that ATVs are allowed on the road unless you pass a bylaw to regulate it. So all of a sudden, we have no bylaw, and that means that ATVs are allowed everywhere until we put in place a provision that says where, when, how they should be allowed. So it appears from the wording of the documentation provided that it's probably something that was done to address maybe ATV traveling in the north, where you have a lot of ATVs and trails, and to go from one piece of trail to another, you need to drive down a municipal road allowance. But I think we and Wainfleet have been caught up in the midst of this. So we now have to consider putting in place a bylaw if we wish to regulate where and when and how ATVs are allowed on township roads.
Thank you. And through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Treble, knowing because I had an ATV and it had to be licensed to be on the road. You'd had to go to the ministry and, you know, you had to get your license plate, and I was able to go on the road. And if it wasn't licensed, then that was against the violation of, I guess, the law. Does this also, is this just triggering ATVs, or is it those side-by-sides, or is it all in one? Like what is it? Is it, because, you know, now that, you know, people are steering away from just a straight four-wheeler, they're getting these combination vehicles. I see them up and down. I drive 16 road almost every day. They're up and down going back and forth to the farms, and people use them regularly just to access the farms. It's not so much for joyriding or going trail riding. You know, farmers access them back and forth to get from farm to farm. So so if you want to add into that, Mr. Treble.
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's partly why I wanted to give council or committee a heads up as to the fact that we needed to tackle something like this, because I can see there being some legit reasons why a certain amount of ATV traffic is appropriate. If a farmer is going from field to field or something like that, it may very well be the proper method of transportation for that farmer to scoot down the road. The provisions have to speak to what they call all-terrain vehicles, which are single rider, and what they call a two-up ATV, so where you can have passengers in front of each other straddling a seat. Side-by-side modes such as recreational off-highway vehicles and utility terrain vehicles. And then there are newer ones too, the extreme terrain vehicles, which are the ones with a lot of wheels, and even off-road motorcycles have to be addressed through this bylaw now.
And what about one more thing through you, Mr. Chair, to Treble? I see like golf carts are actually getting fancier too, that they're using almost like an all-terrain vehicle. I see my farmers around here back and forth with fancy golf carts that almost don't have the power, but almost got the speed of an ATV, right? So I guess that's not in the listing there either.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'll do a little bit more digging on that one. As I look at it, it might meet the definition of recreational off-road vehicle.
Yeah. Okay. All right. That's all. Just curious what triggered it and why you know, this is just coming into fruition now. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Treble, for those comments.
No problem. I think, Mr. Mayor, did you have your hand up?
Yes, I did. So, and I appreciate previous Councillor Trombetta's comments, and because I think, you know, there's you know, obviously there's going to be a dialogue that's triggered, and things have been, you know, I mean, we do get complaints about some activity on open road allowances, but this is really not what's at stake here. This is about using the main roads. My only concern or my comment would be, is there an opportunity then, like, I'd like to get some public engagement on that. So is there automatically a trigger as soon as we have a bylaw of this nature that we would have a public format? Mr. Chair, through you to the Director of Planning.
Through you, Mr. Chair. There is really nothing that mandates public consultation, Mr. Mayor, but staff fully agree. We think public consultation, even if for no other purpose than to get word out, is quite valuable. So yeah, we have recommended and will recommend that we do some consultation with the public as part of a recommendation to council before a bylaw is passed.
Yeah, and just you know, we might ruffle a lot of feathers by approaching this. So maybe just as a word of advice, I know that there are usually like a preliminary amount of work that's constructed on a bylaw, but we might have quite blowback on this type, and we might have a strong desire for from the municipal residents to just say, you don't leave well enough alone. If the province is regulating them, they have license plates on there, rather than go spend great gobs of time detailing it and micromanaging it. Just a thought, just kind of speaking knee-jerk kind of approach. So thank you very much, sir, and Chair, I'm done.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a comment as well. I see Councillor Yonker has his hand up, so I'll go to Councillor Yonker first.
Yeah, I just would like to kind of agree with the last speaker there, Mr. Mayor. There's rules that the provincial government is putting in place, and I think it would be wise to maybe take a look at what we want to control, what we want not to, but we do need to keep in mind that we do have a lot of people that do enjoy the recreational vehicles just for recreation as well, not just for the farmers. So I would kind of agree with the mayor here that, hey, we might not even need to really do anything. It just, and I think that's maybe what staff is saying too. We want to just look at this, propose something, or whatever. So I think it's just, yeah, we do need to keep in mind that, like the councillor said, the farmers use these vehicles quite regularly for what they do. And there is quite a bit of recreational activity that does happen. And we don't want to cut that off either. I feel, right. So it's good that we move forward with this carefully. So good.
Yeah. Go ahead, Mr. Chair, or Mr. Treble.
Through you, Mr. Chair, just to sort of, I guess, echo what I'm hearing. There is some consultation or inquiring, I guess, that staff want to do. We've reached out already to the local federation reps to get a sense from them of where their head might be at with such a bylaw. We're also investigating other bylaws that exist elsewhere just to see what kind of things are being regulated out there. For example, the one that I've noticed is that they, Chatham-Kent, I think it was, indicates that ATVs are to be only allowed on the road from 1/2 hour after sunrise to 1/2 hour before sunset, for example. So I'm trying to get a sense of what kind of things could at least be discussed or are relevant to a bylaw. And then we can have some fulsome discussion before I write a bylaw for sure, just to get a sense of how we go forward.
Excellent. And my question, I guess, to you, Mr. Trouble, would be, is this something too that can be considered as far as having, I guess, a different bylaw, like between urban and rural? Like, is that something that will be considered, or is it just as easy to keep it one simple bylaw that applies to the whole municipality?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I sense from what I've observed so far that we really can do either. Chatham-Kent as an example, which is one of the more current bylaws, that's why I sort of have it in my mind, has different provisions and identify that different roads are allowed to have different vehicles on them at different times. I don't know if we want to get that complicated, but it appears that we can do a variety of different things as long as it's easy to explain in a bylaw format.
Excellent. Oh, Councilor Trombetta.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just through you, one more question to Mr. Treble there. I know you said the second portion of this report says you're going to come back with a draft bylaw prior to holding a public meeting. You know, just to kind of discuss a little further, you know, sometimes when we have a public meeting, we have no attendees, you know, we're kind of in the midst of saying, well, no one showed up and, you know, we just kind of go through with this bylaw. But this could be a contentious bylaw for some of our farmers out there. So I'm kind of concerned, especially in this COVID world that we're living in. Hopefully it's over sooner than later. And, you know, by holding a public meeting, we get no attendees. We're just kind of saying, well, you know, we had no comments, no attendees. We're just going to go through with the bylaw. But again, and then once this bylaw does go through, it could cause a bit of an uproar. And I just hope we can be mindful as a council to kind of tweak it properly, just to protect, like I said, the farmers that go from chicken barn to chicken barn and back and forth all over the place in the rural communities. So that's all, just a comment, Mr. Trouble. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Mr. Trombetta. I think the biggest thing to take away from it too is that staff's just going to do their research and figure out everything before that gets presented to us. And I think at that point, that could be the more appropriate time to really digest how this is going to impact everyone if we go forward with anything at all. So anyways, is there any other questions or comments from anyone? Not seeing any. I'm going to call for the vote. All those in favor?
Lord.
And opposed? Not seeing any. So that passes unanimously. So we're going to move forward. I'm sorry, break up my other window here. Yep. So we're moving to, I guess, other business. You know, item P20-21, members of committee, other business matters of an informative nature. Are there any other matters that committee would like to speak about at this time? I see Councillor Yonker.
Yeah, I just don't remember if this is where we bring it up, but I just thought I'd pass on the fact that the AGM meeting for the West Lincoln Chamber of Commerce is going to be on, drawing a blank here, February 18th. And yeah, at that meeting, we'll be hopefully appointing new board members. And yeah, just thought I'd share that with the community. That the chamber is still functioning. It's definitely challenging, just like what we have here with meetings as Zoom meetings, but getting people engaged is a little bit harder when you're dealing with restrictions. So just hats off that they're able to still continue with things, and it will be a virtual meeting, but that will be on the 18th, I believe, at 5 o'clock. 5, yes, the mayor will be there. So thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Jonker. And Mr. Mayor, you had your hand up for a brief moment there.
Yes, I did. I just wanted to highlight kind of an exciting announcement. It was an immediate announcement last week with respect to the hospital that they moved to phase 3 and $15 million was committed by the province to get a lot more granular on our hospital. And it's quite a significant step. I hope I didn't steal any of Councillor Ganan's thunder, but it was an exciting opportunity. And so, you know, what more can be said? It's collaborative effort. There, you know, you know, things are moving very, very well. So just pleased about that. And there was probably for the first time, just a small indication that June 22, June 2022 might be shovels in the ground. So there was probably the closest thing to a commitment for a shovel in the ground. But it was mentioned publicly in that meeting. And so I'm going to just latch onto it and say that while it's not in that sense official yet, it was a strong indication that timelines are moving very, very well. So pretty excited about that. That's all, Mr. Chair.
Excellent, thank you. And I certainly will keep my fingers crossed that we can hit June 2022 for those shovels in the ground. Councillor Ganaan?
I wasn't going to speak, but since the mayor started with the hospital, I will just add on that some of the phase 3 work has already begun. So while we were in phase 2, there was permission given to start some of that phase 3 work, which is why they can now say, hopefully, it will be shovels in the ground by the spring of 22. So that's good news. And the other little piece of good news is that the outbreak on Seaward is officially over. There was a COVID problem there, and it was announced this afternoon that it's officially over, and they'll be returning over the next week to normal practices. Oh, fingers crossed that it stays that way. So that's all. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. And anybody else? Oh, Mr. Treble.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My apologies. I don't normally want to do anything this way, but I just wanted to mention for the benefit of everyone that on Thursday night this week from 6:30 to 8:30 is the PIC 1 Public Information Center with respect to the Urban Boundary Expansion Master Community Plan process. So if you are interested, I think most of you probably were in attendance last year at the gymnasium around the end of February, just before COVID hit. That was what we called PIC 0. This is the next public consultation called PIC 1. And if you're interested, reach out to Garrett and he can get you connections to a Zoom invite for that session on Thursday night, 6:30 to 8:30.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, not seeing anything else. And just for the record there, Deputy Clerk, I think we've lost Councillor Rayner. Not too sure when he dropped out, but he certainly was with us in the last item before we went into other business. So anyways, just make that noted. And moving to new business, are there any items of new business by members of council? All right, not seeing any. We have no confidential items tonight. So at this point, I'll adjourn the meeting at 8:02 p.m.